It was just past sunset when Manny Pacquiao's car rolled quietly into the driveway. He'd been away for 3 days. Business meetings, charity work, the usual whirlwind that kept him moving from city to city. But tonight, he was tired in a way that had nothing to do with boxing or travel. He missed home. He missed the warm chaos of family. He stepped inside, the familiar scent of home-cooked dinner lingering in the air. Somewhere upstairs, he could hear the faint hum of a television. The house felt calm, almost too calm. He walked down the hallway, past framed photos of victories and family moments, until he reached the study room, the one where his youngest daughter, Queenie, usually had her evening lessons. The door was half open, and that's when he froze. Through the narrow gap, he saw Queenie sitting at her desk, her small shoulders hunched as she stared at her open notebook. Standing behind her was the tutor, a man in his early 30s, well-dressed, wearing an easy smile. His hand rested on the middle of her back. Not a tap, not a brief pat, but resting. It could have been nothing. Maybe a gesture of encouragement. Maybe. But something in Queenie's eyes, that faint stiffness in her posture, made Manny's heartbeat slow and heavy. He'd been in enough fights to know when something wasn't right. And this was one of those moments. The tutor was saying something softly to Queenie. She nodded, but her eyes didn't lift from the page. Manny's hand tightened around the doorknob. Part of him wanted to storm in right then, voice raised, demanding answer. But another part, the part that had learned patience in the ring, held him back. If there was something here, he needed to understand it fully. From somewhere behind him, Jinky's voice called, "Manny, you're home?" He didn't answer. Not yet. He pushed the door open another inch. His eyes locked on his daughter, her tutor, and the space between them. The air felt heavier. The seconds stretched, and then Queenie looked up, straight into her father's eyes. Something passed between them. Silent, urgent, unspoken. Manny stepped into the room. The moment Manny stepped into the room, the tutor straightened quickly, his hand sliding off Queenie's back as if it had never been there. "Ah, Senator Pacquiao," he greeted with a wide, overly pleasant smile. "I didn't know you were home so early." Manny didn't return the smile. His eyes moved from the man's face to his daughter's, searching for something. A flicker of relief, maybe. A hint of fear. Queenie's gaze darted down to her notebook again, as if she was afraid to meet his eyes for too long. "I like to surprise my family," Manny said quietly, stepping close. His tone wasn't angry. Not yet. But it had the kind of weight that made people think twice before speaking carelessly. The tutor cleared his throat, shuffling a few papers on the desk. "We were just finishing the last part of her assignment. She's been making great progress." Manny placed a hand gently on Queenie's shoulder. She didn't flinch, but her small hand slid over his, squeezing lightly, almost as if to say, "Don't make a scene." That alone told him more than words could. "Jinky," Manny called, his voice steady, "can you bring us some water?" His wife appeared at the door a moment later, her expression curious. She sensed the tension in the room but said nothing, leaving to get the drinks. As soon as she was gone, Manny pulled up a chair beside Queenie. "Why don't you show me what you've been working on?" The tutor stood a little too close behind her. Manny noticed. Every muscle in his body wanted to tell the man to back away, but he stayed still, watching, measuring. Years of championship fights had taught him not to swing without reading the opponent's next move. Queenie began reading from her notebook. Her voice was steady, but Manny caught the quick glances she gave the tutor, as if checking his reaction. When she finished, Manny nodded. "That's good work, Anak." Then he turned to the tutor, his eyes narrowing just slightly. "How long have you been teaching my daughter?" "Almost 3 months now," the man replied, his smile still fixed in place. "She's very bright, a pleasure to work with." Manny studied him in silence. Something about the way he spoke felt rehearsed, like someone performing a part they'd practiced many times. Jinky returned with the water, setting the glasses down on the desk. Manny took a slow sip, then looked at Queenie again. "Why don't you take a short break and go say hi to your brothers? I need to talk to your teacher for a moment." Her eyes flickered with worry, but she obeyed, sliding off the chair and walking quickly toward the door. She didn't look back. When the door closed behind her, the room felt heavy. Manny leaned back in his chair, folding his hands. "I appreciate you helping my daughter with her studies," he said slowly. "But I noticed something just now. Your hand was on her back for quite a while." The tutor's smile faltered, just a little. It was just encouraged. She was nervous about her answer. I've been around people all my life, Manny interrupted, his voice low but sharp. I know the difference between encouragement and something else. The man's eyes narrowed slightly. With respect, Senator, I think you might be overthinking. No, Manny said firmly. I'm not. The silence that followed was tight, unyielding. Outside, somewhere in the house, Manny could hear his children laugh. Inside this room, there was no laughter, only the sound of two men measuring each other. Manny stood slowly. We'll continue this conversation later, he said. For now, I think it's best you leave. The tutor hesitated, as if considering whether to argue, but something in Manny's gaze convinced him otherwise. He gathered his papers quickly, stuffing them into his bag. As the man walked toward the door, Manny followed, his presence like a shadow that couldn't be shaken off. Next time you walk into this house, Manny said quietly, make sure you remember whose home it is, and who you're here for. The tutor didn't answer. He left without another word. Manny closed the door behind him, leaning against it for a moment. His fists were unclenched, but his jaw was tight. He didn't yet know exactly what was wrong, but his gut told him the story wasn't over. And Manny Pacquiao had learned long ago, you never ignore the first round of a fight. Manny found Queenie in her bedroom, curled up on her bed with her favorite stuffed bear tucked under her chin. The glow from a small lamp bathed the room in warm light, but her face was pale, her lips pressed together in a way that didn't match the comfort of her surroundings. He closed the door softly behind him and sat down at the edge of the bed. Anak, he said gently, look at me. She hesitated before meeting his eyes. In that brief moment, Manny saw it, the thing every parent fears, the shadow of unease, the unspoken weight of something that shouldn't have happened. Did something make you uncomfortable during your lesson today? He asked, his voice calm, steady. Her fingers twisted in the fabric of the bear's ear. Papa, I don't want to cause trouble. Manny's chest tightened. Queenie, you are never causing trouble by telling me the truth. You understand? Never. She nodded slowly, eyes dropping again. Sometimes, the tutor puts his hand on my back, or my shoulder. At first I thought it was just normal, but lately, her voice trailed off. But lately, Manny encouraged softly. Her eyes welled up. Lately, he keeps it there for a long time. And he sometimes leans too close when he's helping me with my work. It makes me feel weird, like I want to move away, but I'm scared it will make him angry. The air in the room seemed to thicken. Manny kept his voice calm, though his hands curled slightly into fists in his lap. Has he ever hurt you? Said anything bad? She shook her head. No, not like that. But, she hesitated. One time, he told me I was pretty smart, and then said I'd grow up to be very beautiful. He smiled in a way I didn't like. Manny exhaled slowly, controlling the storm building inside him. You did the right thing telling me, Anak. This is not your fault. Not at all. Queenie's lower lip trembled. Are you going to be mad at him? I'm going to protect you, Manny said, his tone leaving no room for doubt. That's my job as your papa. There was a knock on the door. Jinky stepped inside quietly, reading the mood instantly. She sat on the other side of Queenie, brushing hair from her daughter's face. I heard, she said softly to Manny. What now? Manny looked between them, his decision forming with every heartbeat. We're not going to shout or fight in front of her, but we will find out exactly who this man is, and make sure he can't do this to anyone else. Jinky nodded, her expression hardening. Later that night, when the children were asleep, Manny sat at the dining table with Jinky. His phone open, he began searching the tutor's name online, a habit he'd learned from years of being in the public eye. Every detail mattered. At first, nothing alarming came up, just a few professional listings, photos of him at school events. But then, buried deep in an old community forum, Manny found a post. It was from a mother in another city, dated 2 years ago. She described a private tutor who had made her daughter uncomfortable with prolonged physical contact during lessons. She never named him directly, but the details, age, physical description, teaching subjects matched. Manny's jaw clenched. It's him, he said quietly. Jinky leaned over his shoulder, reading. This means, it's not the first time. No, Manny agreed. And if we don't act, it won't be the last. They exchanged a look, the kind shared between two people who had faced life's toughest fights together. Manny picked up his phone again, scrolling to a familiar number. I'm calling someone I trust, he said. A friend in the PNP. I want to know everything about this man. His record, his past employers, Everything. As the line rang, Manny's mind replayed the moment in the study, the hand, the smile, the look in his daughter's eyes. He had walked into fights before with bruises and blood in the air. But this was different. This fight wasn't about pride or victory. It was about protection. And Manny Pacquiao had never lost a fight he truly cared about. It was nearly midnight when Manny's phone buzzed. On the screen, the name of his longtime friend, Captain Reyes, lit up. Manny stepped outside to the balcony before answering, the cool night air helping to steady him. "Reyes," he said quietly, "I ran the name you gave me." Reyes replied. His tone was serious, the kind of voice used when the news wasn't good. "You need to listen to this carefully." "I'm listening." Officially, the guy's record looks clean. No arrests, no formal complaints, but when I dug deeper, there's a trail. 3 years ago, he worked at a private academy in Cebu, left suddenly, no reason given. Then a tutoring center in Davao, same story. The families he worked for, 2 of them moved their daughters to different schools after hiring him. I contacted one of the parents. She wouldn't go into details, but she said we just didn't feel comfortable having him around anymore. Manny's grip tightened on the phone. Did any of them report him? No. Same reason as always. Fear, shame, not wanting to be judged. But the pattern is there, Manny. This guy knows how to stay just inside the line of the law. But his behavior, it's calculated. Manny closed his eyes for a moment. He could hear the faint sounds of the city below, cars, laughter from a distant street. But his focus was on the quiet breathing on the other end of the line. "Thank you, Reyes. Keep the file. I might need it soon. You planning to confront him?" Manny's voice was steady. "I'm planning to make sure he never gets near another child again." He hung up and leaned on the railing, staring out at the dark skyline. The anger inside him wasn't the wild, explosive kind. It was slow, controlled, the kind that could wait for the right moment to strike. The next morning, Manny sat at the kitchen table with Jinky. She was already dressed for the day, her expression a mix of concern and quiet determination. "Reyes found something," Manny said, sliding the printed notes across the table. "It's a path, different cities, different schools, always leaving quietly, and now he's here." Jinky scanned the pages, her brows furrowing. "We have to be careful. If we accuse him without proof, he could turn it against us. That's why we don't just accuse," Manny replied. "We gather everything. We talk to the families. We make it impossible for him to explain it away." They decided to start with the most recent family listed in Reyes's notes. Manny made the call himself. "Hello? This is Manny Pacquiao. I'm sorry to bother you, but I believe we've both hired the same tutor." The woman on the other end was hesitant at first. But when Manny explained his concern, carefully, without leading her, she opened up. "Yes," she said after a long pause. "We let him go after a few weeks. My daughter said he was too friendly, always touching her shoulder or her back when she was writing. Once she told him to stop, and he just laughed. We didn't want to take chances, so we ended the arrangement." Manny's chest tightened. "Did you tell anyone?" "No, we just wanted to move on. But if you're asking, then maybe it's worse than I thought." By the time Manny hung up, he had 2 more names from her. Other parents she knew who had similar experiences. 3 different families, 3 similar stories, and now, his own daughter's unease. Jinky stepped in, holding a cup of tea. "What's the next move?" Manny looked up, his expression hardening. "We invite him back, act like nothing's wrong, and then, we put the truth in front of him where he can't run from it." Jinky didn't flinch. "And if he denies it," Manny's voice dropped to a quiet promise, "then he'll see what happens when you step into the wrong fight." Somewhere deep inside, Manny knew this wasn't just about his daughter anymore. This was about every child who had been made to feel small, unsafe, or unheard. And Manny Pacquiao was about to make sure the silence ended. The following afternoon, Manny made the call himself. "Queenie will need her usual lesson tomorrow," he told the tutor, his tone friendly and casual. "I'll be home this time, so we can meet properly." The man agreed without hesitation. His voice was smooth, polite, the same way predators often hide behind charm. Manny hung up and sat back, the plan already forming. He dealt with opponents in the ring who underestimated him, thinking speed and power were all he had. But the truth was, his real strength had always been strategy, waiting for the exact moment to strike. The next day, the tutor arrived right on time. Jinky welcomed him at the door, offering her usual warm smile, but there was a steeliness in her eyes. Manny was waiting in the living room, dressed simply but sitting with the quiet authority of someone who didn't need to prove who he was. "Ah, Sir Manny," the tutor greeted, stepping forward to shake his hand. Manny rose slowly, taking his time. His grip was firm, his gaze direct. Good to meet you. I've heard you've been helping my daughter. Yes, sir, the man replied with a practiced smile. She's very bright. A pleasure to teach. Good, Manny said, motioning toward the study. Why don't you start? I'll just sit in and observe today. I like to see how my children learn. The tutor hesitated for a fraction of a second before nodding. Of course, the lesson began as usual. Queenie at her desk, the tutor standing behind her, explaining a math problem. Manny sat in the corner, seemingly relaxed, his hands folded in his lap, but his eyes never left the man's movements. And then it happened. As Queenie bent over her notebook, the tutor placed his hand lightly on her back. Not a guiding tap, a lingering touch, the same way Manny had seen before. Stop, Manny said. The tutor froze. Sir, step away from her, Manny repeated, his tone quiet but carrying the weight of command. The man laughed lightly. It's just to encourage her. Physical contact can be. The shift in his voice was unmistakable. No longer casual, no longer pretending. The tutor moved to the chair opposite Manny, his smile faltering. Manny reached to the side and picked up a small folder from the table. You've worked in Cebu, Davao, and now each time you leave suddenly. Do you know what I have here? Statements from 3 different families describing exactly what you just did to my daughter and worse. The tutor's eyes flickered. This is ridiculous. They're misunderstanding. No, Manny cut him off. I've been in fights where my opponent tried to hit me when the referee wasn't looking. You think I can't recognize the way someone hides their real moves? The man's voice grew defensive. You have no proof. Touching a student's back isn't illegal. Manny leaned forward, his eyes locked on the tutor's. Maybe not, but making a child feel unsafe, making them afraid to speak, that's something I will never let slide. The room was silent, except for the sound of Queenie shifting uncomfortably in her chair. Jinky had stepped closer to her daughter, resting a protective arm around her. You can leave now, Manny said, finally, and you won't be coming back. But before you walk out of this house, understand something. He stood, his full presence filling the room. If I hear you've done this to anyone else, I will make sure the whole country knows exactly who you are and what you've done. No lawyers, no quiet exits. You will face every parent you've ever made uncomfortable. And I promise you, that fight, you will not win. The tutor opened his mouth as if to argue, then closed it again. He gathered his things in silence and walked to the door under the weight of Manny's gaze. When the door closed, Manny turned to Queenie, kneeling so he was eye level with her. It's over, Anak. You're safe. Her small arms wrapped around his neck. Thank you, Papa. Manny held her close, a deep relief washing over him. This fight had no title belt, no roaring crowd, but it was the most important victory of his life. The house felt quieter after the tutor left, but Manny knew the fight wasn't over. Kicking the man out had protected Queenie. Yes, but what about the other children? What about the ones who didn't have parents who could stand in the doorway like a wall between them and harm? That night, Manny sat alone in his study. His championship belts lined the shelves behind him, but his focus wasn't on past victories. He had his laptop open, a blank document staring back at him. Slowly, he began to type. It wasn't a statement full of legal jargon or political correctness. It was a father's voice. Raw, honest, and unfiltered. This week, something happened in my own home that shook me. I saw my daughter made uncomfortable in a way no child should ever feel. I acted, but I know there are many parents who never get the chance to see, to know, or to stop it. This message is for you and for every child who feels too small to speak up. He wrote about the pattern the tutor had followed, moving from place to place, slipping away before anyone could take real action. He explained how silence and fear allowed such behavior to continue, and he challenged every parent to believe their children's instincts, to ask the hard questions, and to never assume that friendly always means safe. When he finished, Manny read it aloud to Jinky. She nodded quietly. Post it. People need to hear that. By morning, the post had gone viral. Thousands of shares, comments flooding in, some thanking him for speaking up, others sharing their own stories of uneasy encounters with authority figures, coaches, or tutors. One comment caught Manny's attention. My daughter didn't say anything until now. Thank you for opening this conversation. He replied personally, please connect with me directly. We can help each other. The media picked up the story within 48. Headlines read, Manny Pacquiao speaks out on child safety. And from boxing ring to battle for children's rights. Interviews followed. On one morning show, the host asked, Manny, why speak up now? He leaned forward in his chair. Because I'm tired of seeing children being taught to stay quiet. We train athletes to fight in the ring. We should also train families to fight for their children's dignity. Within a week, Manny had partnered with a local child protection group to launch a new campaign, Safe Hands, Safe Hearts. The goal was simple: to educate parents, train teachers, and give children the tools to speak up without fear. At the campaign's first public event, Manny stood on stage beside Jinky and Queenie. Hundreds of parents and children filled the park. "I want you to look around," he told the crowd. "Every child here has the right to learn without fear. Every parent here has the responsibility to protect that right. We cannot let silence be the shield that hides those who do wrong." The audience applauded, but Manny's voice stayed firm. "This isn't just my fight. This is yours too. Whether you're a celebrity or a street vendor, a teacher or a driver, when it comes to protecting our children, we are all in the same corner." Others whispered stories, their voices trembling with a mix of pain and relief. One elderly woman gripped his hand tightly. "You may have been fighting for belts all your life, but this is the greatest fight you'll ever win." Manny smiled humbly. "Then I'll fight it every day." As the sun began to set over the park, Manny looked out at the crowd, parents hugging their children a little tighter, kids running freely without a shadow over their joy. This was more than just a victory against one man. It was the beginning of a movement. And for Manny Pacquiao, the bell had only just rung for round one. Weeks had passed since the confrontation with the Tutor, but its echo was still felt in the Pacquiao household. The campaign's Safe Hands, Safe Hearts had grown beyond anything Manny expected. Schools were requesting workshops, churches and barangays were hosting seminars, parents were forming their own local watch groups. And yet, amid the public momentum, Manny found himself thinking about the quiet moments, the ones no news camera would ever capture. One evening, Queenie climbed onto his lap. While he was reviewing notes for an upcoming Senate session, she leaned her head against his chest and whispered, "Papa, you're my superhero." The words hit harder than any punch he'd ever taken. "Why do you say that, Anak?" Manny asked softly. "Because you don't just fight in the ring, you fight here." She tapped her small hand over her heart. For a moment, Manny couldn't speak. His throat tightened, and he kissed the top of her head. In that instant, he understood something deeply. Championship belts, fame, and money might fade, but the fights for his family's safety and dignity would always be his greatest victories. The following Sunday, Manny decided to visit General Santos City, where he grew up. He wanted to speak at a small community center, the same one where he'd once trained as a young boxer. This time, though, there was no boxing ring, no gloves, no referee, only rows of plastic chairs filled with parents, grandparents, and children who looked at him with trust in their eyes. He told them his story, not as a senator or a world champion, but as a father who almost didn't see the danger standing in his own home. "I've fought men who wanted to knock me down," Manny said, his voice steady, "but the real danger sometimes wears a smile. It comes as a friend, a teacher, a helper, and it can still hurt the ones we love if we're not paying attention." A father in the front row raised his hand. "But what if people say we're overreacting?" Manny looked him straight in the eye. "I would rather overreact and protect my child than stay silent and regret it for the rest of my life." The room erupted in applause. After the talk, Manny stayed behind to shake hands, sign autographs, and more importantly, listen. Dozens of parents shared experiences they had never told anyone before. Some cried, some spoke in whispers. One young mother clutched his arm and said, "You gave me courage to believe my daughter when she told me she was uncomfortable with her teacher." That night, Manny sat alone in his old training corner, the worn-out bench where he used to lace up his gloves. He could still smell the faint scent of leather and sweat from years past. But now, instead of preparing for a fight in Las Vegas or Macau, he was preparing for something bigger, a fight that didn't end in 12 rounds. Back in Manila, the campaign gained national attention. Other celebrities joined the cause. Laws were proposed to strengthen background checks for tutors, coaches, and youth workers. The ripple effect was undeniable. But Manny knew that awareness wasn't enough. Real change required vigilance, every day, in every home. One night, as the family sat together after dinner, Jinky looked at him and smiled. "You know, you've won world titles before, but I think this is the first time I've seen you win something that touches everyone's life." Manny chuckled softly. "In boxing, you fight for yourself, your team, maybe your country. But this is fighting for the future." He looked around at his children, laughing, teasing each other, safe in the warmth of home. "And the future is worth every punch, every bruise, every sleepless night. As he prepared for bed that evening, Manny checked his phone one last time. There was a message from a father he had never met. "Because of your story, my son finally told me something he was afraid to say. We stopped it in time. Thank you." Manny set the phone down and smiled. He knew the fight would never be truly over. There would always be another child to protect, another family to encourage, but that was fine with him, because in the ring, Manny Pacquiao had been a champion, and outside of it, he had become something greater, a protector, a voice, and a reminder that the strongest punches aren't thrown with the fists, but with the heart.